Okay, today we are continuing with our 12 steps to spiritual recovery, and today we're looking at spiritual freedom. And this is a very important aspect of our 12-step spiritual recovery program, because what we are doing is tapping into an idea where we are required to act as if the thing we are asking for we've already received. And that's a basic principle of prayer, of course. But the step is, I desire greater freedom because my soul is already free. Through study and introspective thought, I seek to understand the truth of this statement. Shall we say that together? I desire greater freedom because my soul is already free. Through study and introspective thought, I seek to understand the truth of this statement. So it's important for us to know that we desire freedom because the soul is already free. And again, what we're doing is recalling or recollecting what is true at the spiritual level. Even though we may not be experiencing it, we could have something going on in our life where we feel very much in bondage to that thing. And that's one of the difficulties of having a body, of being on this plane, experiencing the physical side of life. And of course we want to continue to do that. And so the spiritual study, what I've come to realize is the spiritual study doesn't do anything to improve the soul. And that may sound like a contradiction. Spiritual study reminds us of what is true of the soul. We're coming back in our thinking, in our consciousness, to what is true of the soul. Because as we live our life, most of the time we're not thinking about what is true of the soul. We're thinking about what is true of the circumstances around me, what's true of what that person said, or what that situation appears to be. And that is our reality. Excuse me, if you look up the word nature, just do a Google search on nature, and it will make a distinction between the natural world, or the world of nature, and the human experience. It'll say nature is, thus and so, as opposed to the human condition, the human experience. So by definition, our thinking has separated us from what is real, from the natural world. And yet we are all part of that. When it comes down to it, we're mammals. We know that. We don't like to think of ourselves as mammals, but we are. We fit in that category. But what we have done is we have created a sphere, almost like a biosphere, but it's a human consciousness sphere of relationships, conditions, situations that don't exist in the natural world. They are products of the human imagination. And what we are saying is that's reality. And so that reality that I'm living by says I'm not complete. That spiritually I'm not complete. And actually I was born into a culture that says spiritually you're not complete. You've got to be saved, or you've got to evolve the soul to a place where it is more complete. I talked about that last week in The Complete Soul. But it's important for us to get into our thinking that we're not trying to develop anything at the spiritual level. We are acknowledging what is already true, what is already there. And that is a very difficult thing to buy into, because we are living in this human creation that we call reality. And that's why science basically says when the body's gone, so are you. You are a product of your body, because that science is based on this creation that we are calling human reality that doesn't exist in nature. And it appears to be true. But our soul has nothing to do with that dimension. We are expressing through it, and we probably have come into this dimension many times, and the human experience was defined differently. We have probably come through many times when the human experience would have been called something entirely different, or would have been more in line with what is true at the natural level. I think we see this in a lot of Native American cultures. We see it in a lot of Aboriginal cultures where people are living closer to how the universe works. And we have created another layer that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. As long as we have batteries, it does. As long as we have electricity. If our electrical grid were knocked out today, we would be up a creek. I'm not sure what our society would do. It would implode. I'm guessing. I don't know for sure, but we would have to revert back to our more primitive, we would call it primitive or natural thinking. And I'm not suggesting that we go backward. I'm not suggesting that we wipe out technology. We're using it now. I'm speaking not only to you guys, but to a lot of people around the world because of this technology. And I think it's a very nice thing to have as long as it works. But when it stops working, the communications shut off. And it can happen in the blink of an eye. So it's a fairly fragile thing that we are calling reality. And so there's a lot of stress there, that reality gets pushed all the time. We say this is life and this is how it should be, and somebody comes along and messes up the water, and that reflection I'm looking in is suddenly difficult to discern, and I'm use all my prayer power to get it back into a constant reflection where I can get back. But that's the power of spiritual understanding, is we always have the opportunity to step into that reality, to take time to reconnect, to reground ourselves in that reality. So when the disturbance occurs, we're not so quickly disturbed. And I think that's kind of a relative way to look at it. We're getting better at some things we're not. But no matter how disturbed we get, the soul is completely free and undisturbed at all times. And we can always return to that. That's that inner sanctuary, that inner place that Jesus talked about. To go in your inner room and shut the door and pray to your Father who's in secret. The terminology doesn't fly so well in today's society, referring to God as a man, but that doesn't matter. We understand what it means. Go to your source. At any time we can touch that, and why is that? Because it's always there. It's always unchanging. And so we get disturbed. We're the disciples in the boat in the storm, thinking we're going to die. And Jesus is there, same boat, asleep, totally unperturbed by the storm. And the disciples were actually angry at him, just like society gets angry because we're not reacting like we're supposed to. But Jesus represents that level of soul that is not perturbed, doesn't change. And so he said to the waves and the storm, "Peace, be still." That is three of his most famous words, I think. And I say that often to myself, "Peace, be still." It's a wonderful affirmation. And why can that be a wonderful affirmation? Because it's true. I'm saying, "Peace, be still." I'm telling myself, go into that place in yourself where reality is there and it's still and it's constant and it's safe, and it's empowering. And it gives me another way to look at the situation I'm involved in that is otherwise disturbing, that storm where I'm being tossed around. I've been in a few storms on boats, and it is a little unsettling. We've all been in storms in life, very unsettling. But I'm sure we've also all had the experience of being in a storm one moment and then finding our center of peace the next. And we've proven to ourselves that it's possible. So where does that peace come from? We don't generate it. We find it, we uncover it, we recover it. Spiritual recovery. We step it back into that, what is true of us at the deepest level. When Jesus told his audience that they would know the truth and the truth would make them free, they took issue saying they had never been enslaved. Few of us can deny that we've had our times when we were enslaved by fear and anxiety. For many, fear is a constant companion that has become so familiar, it is accepted as a standard feature of the human experience. There's this fight or flight syndrome. It's why can't there be more? Why have we narrowed it down to those two things? We either get into a fight or we run away. We're saying fear is natural, and we either fight out of fear or we run away out of fear. But there are other ways of looking at this from a spiritual perspective. So the disciples, or Jesus' audience, said, "We've never been enslaved. What are you talking about?" And Jesus said, "Whoever sins is a slave to sin." And we've talked about sin. What does that mean? It means to miss the mark, to fall short of the divine potential. Every time we fear, we sin, or we miss the mark of what is possible. But don't think of sin as something that, you do it now and you're going to be punished for it later. Our missing the mark is an immediate experience. Whatever it is we're going through at this moment, that's the payoff. And if we have fallen in fear and we're cowering in fear and reacting in fear, that's the quality of our life at that moment. We don't need a hell to go to after life. We're going through it right now. That reaction is our sin, our missing the mark. Because we're saying, I'm something less than I'm created to be. So I'm missing the mark of how I'm defining myself. But we don't look at that in a condemning way. Because as I have said many times, we can totally mess up this life. We can do all the wrong things and we'll still be okay. The soul is still complete, still in perfect condition. And that is a hard one to grasp because it doesn't feel like it. But that is something that we need to keep in our minds. That's the whole idea of salvation. It's baptism, being born again, being saved. There's a truth to that. There's a truth behind that ritual. And the truth is we're saved. We are already saved. We've never been condemned at the soul level. That's all a human construction. And we probably learned it in church. Where did you learn about sin? You weren't born knowing about it. You had to go to church to learn it. Where did you learn that you were a sinner? Where did you learn that you, without being saved or baptized or accepting whatever, that you weren't good enough? I think all of us picked that up in our religious training. And we're having to unlearn that. Spiritual recovery. We're having to recover what is true of us. And in my mind, That's the message that Jesus came to teach. You're not going to hell. You are an expression of God. You may be going through hell in your thinking, in your life, the way you're expressing in your life right now. But this is of your creation. This is your perception. And yes, we can go through hell. We can go through all kinds of rough situations. Every bad situation we've gone through, 90% of it's probably mental and emotional. It's how we're perceiving and reacting and what might happen. And we're going through things that we invent as we go, thinking the very worst thing could happen. You know, we think, what's the very worst thing that could happen? And we rehearse that over and over, and we live in that bondage. We're sinning. We're falling short of our divine potential. We're seeing something that is not true of reality. We're falling short of what is true at the deepest level. So anytime you're going through something, if you can make the distinction between what is real at the soul level and what you're experiencing at the mental and emotional level, that's two different things. And what we're trying to do, you know, Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world, meaning the mental and emotional world. That's not what we're trying to save. My kingdom is of the deeper world, the deeper level, the deeper reality. That's what I represent. And that's why many people do not understand what I'm saying, because they're all trying to figure it out up here. They want a Messiah to show up and get rid of the Romans and get rid of the problems in the world so they can be peaceful. Well, actually, the Romans helped the Jews establish peace in the beginning, because they were all fighting amongst themselves. And the Romans came in and tried to establish order, and that went on for a while, and then the Romans became the enemy. But you get rid of the Romans and you still have unrest, you still have battles, you still have fighting. We look at the era of Gandhi in India. I think Gandhi was a great leader. But is there peace there now? They have as many nuclear bombs as we do, I think. It's like, what was resolved there at the human level? And really nothing. At the human level, we're always going to have wars and rumors of wars. The poor will be with you always. We're not trying to resolve the human level. We're trying to open our minds to the deeper level, that spiritual level. We're trying to experience a spiritual recovery. Knowing the truth is not a one-shot deal. It's an ongoing process that we invoke on a situational basis. Jesus said, you'll know the truth and the truth will make you free. And so we all have had those aha moments where we knew the truth and we were free in that moment. But then came along the next moment and the next issue, the next situation, and we weren't so free. We found ourselves reacting again to something that looked like it was bigger than us. So this is a thing that we live with on a moment-by-moment basis. You don't just know truth and the rest of your life you'll be free, because we have this physical body and it will always be subject to these things. You know, if we don't have a body, you can say, I would like to go to the grocery store, and think of the grocery store and you'll be there. But then because you don't have a body, there's no sense in being there, because you don't have to eat. And what does that have to do with anything I'm saying? There's a level of reality that we're grounded in, but we have this thing called a body that we're dragging around, we're transporting around, we're turning on our air conditioners and our heaters and feeding it, clothing it. taking care of this thing, a lot of our attention goes there, and a lot of things go wrong at that level. And so we say life is difficult. The reality is life in the body is sometimes difficult. It is. So we think we're going to learn truth, and suddenly life in this physical body will no longer be difficult. Well, there will always be wars and rumors of wars. There will always, the poor will be with you always. In other words, that level of experience that we're all subject to in the body will always be there. So you come to know the truth, and it sets you free in that moment. The truth is, I am an unlimited soul, totally complete right now. And I grasp that. And it makes perfect sense to me at this moment. But then I get a call from the bank and it says, we didn't get your payment this month. And suddenly you rush into this thing. You sin. You start sinning. Start reacting to that information. That is, you fall into something less than what you were just moments ago. So that kind of thing is always going to be with us as long as we're in this body. And it's interesting to think about, if we know that before we take a body on, why would we do that? I've thought about that a lot. And there's got to be something, there's got to be some payoff here that brought us into this level of experience. Something we were after, something we were trying to prove to ourselves, or we just wanted to experience it. Might be that chocolate ice cream that's in our freezer at home, or that cup of coffee, or that relationship in a physical body, or just the experience of being here on earth, knowing that I've compared it to writing a book. You know, it's a very inspiring thing. You get this idea, I'm going to write this book, and I know exactly what I want to say. Well, you start writing it, and that's like incarnating in a body. Suddenly you have all these problems. Everything from grammar to writer's block, to how do I link all these things together? You know, I know what I want to say. Well, how do I say it? My brain goes faster than my fingers, so I can't get down on the computer exactly what I'm thinking. I know what I want to say. So we're bringing something, we're giving birth to something in the three-dimensional world, and that's a very different thing than the inspiration that prompts us to do that in the first place. So I think that's kind of how it is to be born. Before we step into this body, we have this idea of how we're going to live our lives and what we want to do and who we want to get in touch with and all that. And then we get down into it, and it becomes like a quagmire sometimes. And I'm not putting this down because I think it's a very brief moment experience, a momentary experience. And what I've said many times, you know, you're going through a challenge. What you want to do is think, when this challenge is over, will I be proud of the way I handled it? And I think that's what the life review is all about. I think that's the opportunity for all of us to look at our lives, and we're apparently given that opportunity in a matter of seconds. We know every thought we've ever thought. We know every thought that every person around us has thought, every feeling, and we are able to review it and ask ourselves, could I have done better? Most people don't want to come back. They don't want to get back in that body and try to do better, because they say it is so much easier without it. But I don't want to give it up. Any of us can give it up anytime we want. I don't want to do that. And that's also what's interesting is people that have these experiences are told, it's not your time yet. And I think what that means is we all had a reason for making the choice to come here. And whoever's telling us that is saying, you're not listening to yourself. Somehow you've gotten out of touch with your deeper self, and you've not accomplished or not done what you came here to do. They're not saying it's not your time yet because there's a ticking clock on the wall up in heaven. They're saying you haven't come here to do what you agreed to do or wanted to do, and so you're going to feel a little bit unhappy if you leave right now. You're going to feel like something's not done. That's, to me, that makes the most sense. Have you ever been in a job you really didn't like, and you were in it for quite a while and it seemed like it would never end, and then it came time to end, and you start thinking, well, I'm going to be free of this, and it really wasn't that bad, and if I could go back and do it again, I'd probably do a better job. Well, the truth is you probably wouldn't. You'd probably do it exactly like you did the first time. But we've all had that kind of feeling, and I think that's what the life review is all about. And it's almost universal. Almost everyone who reports a near-death experience has a life review. It's pretty rare that's not part of the features they go through. So I think it's an important thing to start reviewing right now. What am I here about? What am I here to do? If we grasp the truth that God did not give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, we have a clear starting point for our experience of spiritual freedom. What is this spirit of power, and how do I claim it? And that's what we ask ourselves when we are feeling rather powerless. Powerless in a fearful way, not powerless in an empowering way. There's a difference in saying I'm powerless to do something because there's a power greater than myself working through this. But we can also say I'm powerless in a negative way. I don't know what to do and I'm terrified. It's a whole different way of seeing it. So what is it? What is this spirit of power, and how do I claim it? When I'm feeling powerless, that's the question I ask myself. That's spiritual recovery. So spiritual recovery is not about gaining something we do not have. It is about reclaiming something that has been ours all along, but we have misplaced or lost sight of it. In quiet stillness, we wait, we listen, we feel for that subtle energy of being that stirs in and as our true essence. While our attention readily scurries to the realm of thought and emotion, we practice pulling it back in our quiet center. We do this in special times when we're alone, but we also do it in the midst of our active day, and that's probably the more important time to do it. It is good to set aside time where we let go and let God. But as we're moving through our normal life, to let go and let God, to have that feeling that things are working out, things are okay. My soul is complete at this moment. That I desire greater freedom here because I'm already free, so I want to make that connection. If fear and anxiety creep in, we deny it the right to seize our attention. We remind ourselves that our soul is already free, and we let its light of freedom shine through our consciousness. Carved into this tree says, just say no. So step 7 again is, I desire greater freedom because my soul is already free. Through study and introspective thought, I seek to understand the truth of this statement. Let's say that one more time. I desire greater freedom because my soul is already free. Through study and introspective thought, I seek to understand the truth of this statement. All right. Well, thank you for coming out, and I'll see you next week. We'll go into step 8. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in independent unity, and have a wonderful week.